This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. Welcome everyone to the Kollel Agar the Pirka here in Cougar Hills, New York. So last year, Parshas Toldos, we gave a shiur called The 10 Commandments of Raising Children. We actually gave it here last night as well. So once we're at it, every 10 commandments were then broken and redone again. Right? There's always luchas shniyos. So that's what we're going to do this year. This year we're going to do the 10 Commandments of Raising Children, the second series. 10 completely different commandments, ideas, ingredients. I like to say, not that I know anything about the subject, but this is... now, what I would like to just separate ourselves from is many times how often people go to parenting classes and shiurim, and often I say to myself, okay, nice idea, good idea. Where in the world did you get this from? Just because it works in your house doesn't mean it will work in my house. I'm not interested in ideas that are not grounded in Chazal. I'm interested in them, but we don't always have the right. Of course, you need a healthy dose of common sense, and you have to know, Tein lechacham v'yech gamoid. But what I'm most interested in is what do our Chazal have to say about raising children? Because yes, generations and times always change, but there are universal truths that are only constant through what the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us on Har Sinai. So I think it's very important to always have a basis and a foundation of the Divrei Chazal, the words of the Gedolei Yisrael throughout the ages about Chinuch Habanim. So with that, let us begin. Let us start with what I call commandment number 1. So again, if you want to get the Luchos Rishainos, either you have to remember what we said last year, or go back to the videotape, TorahAnytime.com. This year is Luchos Shniyos, and it's, Luchos Shniyos are always better. That's the Luchos we have today, So, let us begin. The Meiri, one of the great Rishonim, wrote a commentary on Shas, called the Beis HaBechira, and he wrote a sefer on Pirkei Avos. And the Meiri in Pirkei Avos traces the history of the Messiah of Klal Yisrael from Har Sinai until his day, going through Moshe Rabbeinu, the Nevi'im, the Zakenim, and so on and so forth, the Gaonim, the Rishonim, and he's talking about the era of the Gaonim, and he's speaking about Rav Acha Gaon. Says the Meiri, V'achreim Rav Acha. What? Yeah, I can't hear you. If you want to talk to me, let me hear. V'hu chiver sefer hashiltas. Rabbi Achai composed the Shiltas. Kollel harbe midinei haTalmud. The Shiltas includes in it many laws of the Talmud. V'hu min hachiburim sharuyim lismech aleim b'roiv devarav. It's one of those books that you could rely on in almost everything he says. And do you know when the Rabbi Achai Goy lived? He passed away in the year 4512. So the Meiri, in his tracing of the Messiah of Klal Yisrael, includes Rabbi Achai Gaon, and includes the great work of Rabbi Achai Gaon, the Shiltas, the Netziv, Naftali Yehuda of Berlin. He wrote a commentary on the Shiltas called Heimek She'ela, and the Shiltas, one of the great works of Torah She'bal Peh. But what we have to understand is the Shiltas was revolutionary. It completely revolutionized the presentation of Torah She'bal Peh, and the Rabbi Achai Gaon was a trailblazer in the way he presented Torah. In what way? Well, the Meiri, a few pages later, picks up on the fact that if you look at the Shiltas, it is absolutely nothing like anything ever written before. Until the Shiltas, the way halacha was presented was, you had Gaonim, and they wrote Hilchos Brachos, Hilchos Tefillah, Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Eruvin, Hilchos Yamim Tovim. They just taught halacha, broken up by various sections of halacha, Arachayim, Yerodea, Choshen Mishpat, Even Ezar. Comes Rabbi Achai Gaon. Rabbi Achai Gaon revolutionized the presentation of halacha. And that is, if you open up the Shiltas is not composed based on groups of halacha. It's based on the Parsha of the week. Say Parshas Bereshis, and all the halachos connected to Bereshis. Noach, and all the... So that was like a very light version of presentation of Torah. Nobody ever did that before. That was like the first, Medrash says, Me'am Loyez. Nobody ever presented Torah based on the books of the Chumash. I mean, that's like, a very watered-down, light version of things. What was he doing? Why did he do that? That's not, meat and the potato. They don't do that in the Spitz Yeshivas. They have it based on the Chumash. Yeshiva, you go in, you get into the heavy lumdas. The Rebbe doesn't say, okay, now we're going to learn Migu. By the way, there's a remiz to Migu in Parshas Toldos. Come on. That's for, says the Meiri. You know why Rabbi Choy did that? Shahaya loy ben. He had a kid. And this kid, the kid was not interested in learning. Not the kid wasn't so into learning. Not the kid. The kid had absolutely zero interest in learning. And in order to draw his attention, Rabbi Achoy going revolutionize the presentation of Torah. Why? Because it wouldn't work to call the kid in and say, okay, let's learn Hilchos, Chazakas. Well, say what? Get again? I'm not interested. So he had a sort of pull the kid in. How do you pull the kid in? He said, let me tell you a nice story about Yaakov Avinu, and he had a dream with the ladder. And by the way, from here we learn Hilchos Mariv. Oh, Tag, it's very interesting. Rabbi Choy going to revolutionize the presentation of Torah. The Chiber Ba'avuroi, he wrote for his kid Sefer HaSholtis, Shkedei Shebechol Shabbos v'Shabbos, so that every Shabbos, when the kid reads the Parsha of the week, he'll be able to learn and pick up on the halachos. Did Rabbi Choy say that's not what they did in the Altaheim? In the Altaheim, they just taught the kid Lamdos straight off the bat, so that my father didn't do this to me, I'm not going to do this to him. No. Doesn't matter what they did in the Altaheim. In the Altaheim, their method was to teach Torah however it worked. So they did it their way, and you have to do it your way. You have to do whatever works. It doesn't matter if it was never done before. It doesn't matter if it's revolutionary, it's creative, it's innovative. You got to do it. No, in Europe, they didn't use PowerPoint to teach Gemara. But guess what? In most yeshivas today, they do. What do you mean? But, the Vilna Gaon didn't use PowerPoint, and the Chassam Sofer didn't, and even Reb Shimon Shkop didn't. You know what? That's why when Moshe Rabbeinu came, when they got into Eretz Yisrael, they took the Chatzotzros and they got rid of them. Why? Because the Chatzotzros are good in the Midbar, and when you come to Eretz Yisrael, you need new modes of communication. So the Vart of the Meiri, now if I would just come in and tell you this, that every generation needs what's good for its children, for its generation, you say, Rabbi, get lost. There's not the Messiah. So that's why, whatever I'm going to tell you today, I want to bring you documented evidence in the Messiah of Klal Yisrael, that this is our Messiah is that when it comes to chinuch, you have to use what works. You can't be stuck in the mud. You can't say we never did this before. You have to be creative, innovative, and even if it was never done, you got to do what it takes. Rabbi Choy Goin was an Orthodox Jew. He felt that in order to teach Torah to his children, he had to create the shultus. And you know what? Some kids, they learn visually. Some kids learn through hearing. Different modalities speak to different types of children. If your kid, in order to learn, needs to stand on his head, let him stand on his head. Your father, when you stand on your head, would smack you, and it's okay. It's okay. Your kid needs to stand on his head. If he needs to jump and do tumble sauces, some kids, that's how they learn. Every kid learns differently. You got to do what works. That's commandment number 1. Again, it's not my ideas. I'm telling you what the Meiri says. Yeah, but this is with a twang. This is a chanoich lenara pidarkai. Whatever that derech is. And let's move on to commandment number 2. And this is also another dimension of this idea of you have to be able to do what is most successful for that child. Okay. Now, commandment number 2 is dangerous. Commandment number 2 is not something that I could say on my own, or that really anybody could say on their own. And even for an achroin to say it, it's somewhat controversial. But we have to explain it. And that is, here we have 2 children. We have Yaakov and Esav. What's going on? They both grew up in the same household. They both had the same parents, father and mother. They both grew up, they both developed in the same womb. They were twins. And yet, Yaakov is Tzaddik Yisod Olam, his pictures on the Kisei HaKavod. And Esav is the epitome of wickedness. Halacha b'yadua, Esav Sonei Yaakov. Esav is a murderer. He's Baal Nar Murasa. He's a Kaifer Be'ikr. I mean, what happened over here? So most people would say, this is the classic debate, nature or nurture. And it must be that Esav just had a bad nature. He was born with inclinations and proclivity to murder and bloodshed. And with all the teaching in the world, you can have the best Rabbi in the world, the best parents in the world, some kids will just be rotten. That's how most people understand it. And Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says that's absolutely wrong. This is not a case of nature, this is a case of nurture. And even though really this is dangerous to say, and I couldn't say this, and you couldn't say this, and the truth is, even in Achroin, and at least where I come from, cannot say this, but Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says that what created an Esav was the upbringing of Yitzchak and Rivka. Now, even for Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch to say this, where I come from, we are not authorized to attribute any fault with the Avos or the Mais. You know, in the tradition of the yeshivas and the Olam HaTorah, only if Chazal identify a deficiency in the Avos are we allowed to say this is what Chazal say, this is our tradition from Sinai. But for a person, sometimes you read, you know, these rabbis, they say, well, I think that Yaakov, it's apikarsus. You're not allowed to attribute your own lackings and foibles to the Avos v'Mais, unless Chazal do. But what Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch is going to point out, we have no alternative other than to say, this is the way he reads Rashi. Meaning, this is not his own idea, but he feels that this is what Rashi is saying. Now, I'm going to read to you the way Rashi reads the simple way. And I don't think any of us would have read Rashi this way. But clearly, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch has a little bit of a different reading of Rashi. Look at number 3. Vayigdelu hana'arim, the kids grew up. Vayihi Esav, Ish. Esav was a man, Yoidei Atzayid, he knew how to hunt. Ish Sadeh, a man of the field. V'Yaakov Ish Tam, Yaakov was a wholesome man, Yoshev Oihalim, sitting in the tents. Says Rashi, Vayigdelu hana'arim. Kol Zaman, meaning, only once they grew up, then Esav was seen. Esav displayed himself as a warrior, as a man of the field, of a man of bloodshed, and Yaakov displayed himself as a Talmid Chacham. But it's not what the pasuk is saying. It's not that when they were in second grade, Esav already had this little BB gun, and when the squirrels were passing by, he was shooting the squirrels. And Yaakov had his little pocket mishnayos, and when everyone else was playing basketball, he was off in the corner laying mishnayos. No. There was no noticeable difference between Yaakov and Esav when they were kids. Only when they grew up, people began to recognize their actions. Says Rashi, Kozman shahayu ketanim, when they were young, lo hayu nikarim b'ma'aseyim. They were not distinguishable in their actions. Ve'in adam medakdek bahem. Nobody was exacting with them. Mativam, what their nature was. Kivan shenasu b'nei shalosh esrei shana, when they became 13 years old, Zepiresh lebate midrashais. Yaakov separated to the base medrash. V'zepiresh la'avodas kachavim. And Esav separated to idolatry. Meaning, when they were young, you couldn't tell where Yaakov was headed and where Esav was headed. They seemed to have had identical personalities and inclinations. And only when they became 13 years old, then we saw how they developed. That's how I read Rashi. I think most people would have read Rashi that way. That does not seem to be the way Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch reads Rashi. And Rav Hirsch explains that this Rashi, who's saying over the words of Chazal, is finding fault with Yitzchak and Rivka. And that is, very often we have a child, and there may be in that child sleeping and dormant tendencies and inclinations and abilities and talents. And very often where we fail at recognize the particular character and makeup of the child. And then when they become 13 years old, we're surprised that they turn out a certain way, but it's our own fault for not identifying and looking at the kid with a microscope and recognizing where their talents lay, where their abilities lay, where their inclinations lay. It's not that Rashi's saying nobody recognized it, it's that Yitzchak and Rivka failed, says Rav Shamshon Hirsch, in their ability to recognize it, and because of that, that's why Esav was produced. If only they would have recognized that Esav was by nature different than Yaakov, they would have guided and steered Esav in a different direction. Says Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. How often are we guilty? Now, where does your first kid go? Oh, my first kid goes to Yeshivas Minchas Pinchas. Why do he go to Minchas Pinchas? Because Rav Pinchas over there, he's a Goyin Olam, he's a tzaddik, and he did very well with my oldest kid. So where are you sending the second kid? Avada Yeshivas Minchas Pinchas. Why? Well, I already know the administration, and my tuition is going to be cheaper because if I send them to a different school, I'm not going to get a break. But is Minchas Pinchas good for your second kid? What's the difference if Minchas Pinchas is good for my second kid? It's good for me. It works out good. You think I can do 2 carpools? I do 1 carpool. You think then after this schedule, this one in winter vacation, that one winter vacation. Once I know the Rabbi, I know the system, I know how to give them tips, I know how to milk the system, I have it down. So my kids, since it was good for the first kid, all my kids are going to be that. And who is the first kid's Rabbi? My first kid's the Aleph track. Your second kid can't keep up? Yeah, but, all my kids are going to be doing that. And what does your first kid do for a living? My first kid's learning in Koilel. Yeah, but your first kid is intellectual, your first kid has zitzfleisch, your first kid has talent for... your second kid is a Vilda Chaya. He's interested in the outside world, not that one has it. He can't sit and learn. He doesn't have the ability to sit and learn. He has a different type of personality. He needs to be out in a more colorful atmosphere. He needs to be challenged by the outside world. Yeah, no. In my family, this is the way we do it. You see, once the kid is born, I put a straitjacket on them, and I make sure all my kids follow the same path in life. So what are you doing? You're destroying your children. You cannot do wholesale chinuch. There's no such thing as wholesale chinuch. That what's good for A is good for B, is good for C, is good for D. What needs to be done, says Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch, is that from a young age you need to recognize the abilities, the talents, the inclinations of the child. Yaakov and Esav were different by nature. Yaakov was intellectual. Yaakov was of strong moral character. Yaakov had the desire to pursue the spiritual spheres, and therefore it was correct to steer him in the path of Yoshev, Ishtam Yoshev Ahalim. But Esav is a different guy. Esav is a very outgoing personality. Esav is a physical being. Esav needs to be working with his guf. Esav needs to be using his mind in very clever ways. Esav needs to have a more colorful existence. If you tell a kid like Esav, you see Yaakov? So what's Yaakov doing? Yaakov's sitting in the corner. From morning to night, he's davening and learning. He said, Esav, that's good. That's what you're going to do. So Esav said, so basically what you're telling me is you're going to be killing, you're going to be murdering me? You want me to spend my whole life in that corner, davening and learning the whole day? I can't do that. So you're telling me, Esav says, that for me to be a successful Jew, I have to sit in my Dalet Amos and daven and learn. So Esav says, Mali v'latzara zez, what do I need that for? You're telling me there's no legitimate way for me to be a God-fearing Jew with a little bit of a more colorful existence? I can't have a meaningful way of connecting with Hashem in business or in commerce or in hunting. I mean, give me a method, give me a way that I could work with my hands and be out in the world and yet have a meaningful relationship with Hashem. You're telling me the only way to do it is to be like, sit in my Da'at Amos and daven and learn? So Esav said, forget it. Mali v'latzara zois. The mistake, says Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch, is loy hayu nikarim, that Yitzchak and Rivka didn't try to recognize from Esav's youth that he wasn't a Yaakov. He wasn't cut out to be an Ishtam. And they should have steered him away, in a way, to be a successful person outside of the Beis HaMedrash. Now, Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch says something which I don't think is the position of the yeshiva world today, and I'm not here to challenge that position. I'm just here to tell you what Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch says, and that is as follows. Says Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch, when Yaakov was imagined what type of position he would be in on his deathbed with his 12 children around him, Yaakov did not imagine he would be surrounded by 12 Levis, 12 kids who were dedicated solely to Klei Kodesh. That's not what his vision was. His vision was there would be a Zavulon, who was a sea merchant, who would be an honest and erlich sea merchant, who would be able to conduct commerce, who would be able to go out into the outside world, and yet support Torah. Yaakov imagined a Dun and a Gad, who would be skillful and adept in war, in fighting and defending the Jewish people. Yaakov imagined an Asher and a Naphtali, who was able to work in agriculture and make the land productive. Yaakov Avinu imagined 12 Shvatim, some of them with very outgoing personalities, some of them with very abrasive personalities, who could stand up for what's right. Yaakov did not imagine 12 children who all did the exact same thing and sat and davened and learned. That's not what Yaakov had in mind. Yaakov had in mind 12 children with different approaches, different endeavors, different career paths. And yet Yaakov Avinu said, Kol Eile Shiftei Yisrael, Shnei Masar. Yaakov Avinu did not make the same mistake that Yitzchak did. Yitzchak and Rivka did not recognize the tendencies of the child. Listen to what Rav Shamshon Hirsch says. By contrast, Esau, already in early boyhood. Now, Rav Shamshon did not write it in English, and by the way, he didn't write it in Hebrew either. He wrote it in German. So, the English is no different than the Hebrew. I know people like to say, no, I like to use the Hebrew. I'm not, it's not the original language anyway. Anyway, by contrast, Esau already in early boyhood, this is on page 2, on the right-hand side, second paragraph, was driven by the latent impulses of the Yodei Atzayid, the Ish Sadeh, the future hunter who delighted in challenging the forces of nature, in confronting the perils and hazards of life, and in using his physical and mental skills to overcome anything or anyone that stood in his way. He had neither the taste nor the talent for making conquests in the realm of knowledge. Esav had no interest in sitting and harving on a toisvis and saying, what's the hezber and toisvis? Is it siman or is it siba? That's not what he was cut out for. Or in the quest for moral self-refinement. He had no appreciation for the joys or the problems of domestic life. Unfortunately, the manner in which he was educated could only fill him with loathing for the Abrahamite tradition. He grew up under the impression that the acceptance and practical observance of the Abrahamite way of life required a completely one-sided existence centered around study and the duties of domestic life, all things that were completely foreign to his personality. Such a one-sided view, which made the lad Esau believe that the Abrahamite tradition could be carried on only within the narrow confines of the intellect. Meaning Esau thought that the only way to be a successful Jew is if he stays in the Dalet Amos Shel Torah. And he said, I'm not interested in that, and therefore the Judaism is not for me. Had his parents been more observant and more careful to pick up on Esau's abilities, they would have said, you're not going to Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever, you're going to Yeshiva Chveisvas, Mesushalach. You're going to a different yeshiva where they cater to your needs, where they're going to have a seder for you in the morning and the evening, and they're going to teach you how to be an honest businessman and be an ambassador and representative of the Torah. But instead, the parents said, the first kid went to that yeshiva, he had the A-track, he had this Rabbi, he went to yeshiva at this time, then you're going to do the same thing. Says Rav Shamshon Hirsch, very frightening thing. He says, how many Talmidei Chachamim? He writes, many a son of a pious Talmid Chacham has been totally lost to Judaism because his father insisted on training him to become a Talmid Chacham. Right? Ma'asim b'chol yom. Ma'asim b'chol yom. How many Rabbanim and Rosh Yeshivas do we see that they insist that's what their children become, and that's not what their children are cut out for? No, well, who's going to carry out my legacy? Well, your legacy. How about your responsibility for the welfare of your child? Now, Rav Shamshon Hirsch says, don't make, now, again, let's be clear, this is not the approach of the Shiva system today. Shiva system today has a very directive and narrow path, and I'm not here to challenge that, and I'm sure there are reasons why maybe the generation is different and it's a very dangerous time and the spiritual challenges are different today. But I'm just pointing out what Rav Shamshon Hirsch says, that if a parent gives a child very narrow path in life, then the kid says that if this is not for me, then ma'ali v'letzara zayis. Says Rav Shamshon.
Where did you take this from?
From this Rashi, that loy hayu nikarim b'ma'aseyem doesn't mean people didn't recognize it, but they did not recognize it. They should have recognized it.
He goes way beyond that.
Yeah. In Echanami, again, I'm telling you what he says. It's right. So
The word is by Yeshua. It's like the Russian of surprise.
I don't know. So Rosh Hashanah says, but don't get me wrong. The task, he says, it's quite true, of course, that Hakol Kol Yaakov By virtue of its very nature and purpose, Judaism is not intended to conquer the world by sword or physical means, and that the realm of Talmud Torah is important for every Jew. Meaning, no matter what you do in this world, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, electrician, plumber, soldier, every Jew has to be kaveh itim l'Torah in a significant way. There's no question about. Studying of Torah is for everybody, is for the masses, is not only for the clergy. But the idea that every individual has to be absolutely dedicated from day to night solely to study, that is not a viable mahalach for every single child. And ultimately, says Rav Shamshon Hirsch, the reason why Esav veered off is because their parents did not give over to him a legitimate way that he could be connected to Torah with his tendencies and personality. So that is commandment number 2. Recognize the particular inclination of your child and steer him in a way that fits into his inclinations and his personality. That is commandment number 2. Commandment number 3. Says Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Let's look at the pasuk. Vayehav Yitzchak es Esav, Kitzayid bepiv. Yitzchak loved Esav. V'Rivka oheves es Yaakov. Says Rav Shamshon Hirsch. This is the problem. The problem is Yitzchak had a favorite and Rivka had a favorite. There could be no such thing as a parent having a favorite. My wife loves this one because she's so zis and this, and I like this one because he's more like me. He's the most like me. If a parent has a favorite, then you're destroying not only the child who's not your favorite, you're destroying the favorite as well. You cannot allow a child or any of the children to feel that you have someone in the family that you like better than somebody else. Oh, I like this one. They're so cute. They're so charming. They're so talented. They're so well behaved. They're so nice. They're so erlach. He's such a big Talmud Chacham. No. The children have to feel that in their minds that the father and the mother love every child equally and that there's no favoritism. Says Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. What? Says Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, it's a chidush that Yaakov turned out okay. That's what he says. You want to know what destroyed Esav? The fact that in Esav's mind, his mother liked the other one better. He says, no one child should be the favorite of his father or his mother. All children should be equally the favorites of their fathers and mothers and receive the parents' love in equal measure. And if, alas, the feeling of the parents are divided, so that one child knows that he is the father's favorite, the other one is the mother's favorite, then may the all-merciful God send special angels to protect his children, lest their lives be blighted because of the foolish love or indifference on the part of their fathers or mothers. The attitude of parents toward their children should not be influenced by personal likes and dislikes. Meaning, well, this is my style. This type of personality is up my alley. No. You can't use your personal feelings when dealing with your children. It's a rather stoic approach, but you have to be objective. You have to pull yourself back and say to yourself, it's irrelevant which kid I would like better. They're not mine. It is not a thing that I like or dislike. It's a responsibility. It's an achrayus. I have to objectively deal with each child and do for them what will be best to bring out their potential. The moment the children know that you have a favorite, that's the downfall of the child who's not the favorite. And Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says, whoa, if this is not the case. Alas, for both parents and children, if the feelings of the parents are influenced by blind, irrational emotions. He says, we need not dwell on the damaging effect that favoritism can have upon the future of the favorite. It is all too obvious. Meaning, when you have a child who's a favorite, that child's going to go through life entitled, I deserve. Of course, it's all coming to me. That's how they're trained. That's how they're brought up. That their parent gives in to every whim of theirs because, they won over the parent's love. But we can only point to the untold harm that rejection, real or imagined, can inflict upon a child that feels their parent to some degree has rejected them and likes a different child better. Okay, Rabbi say that is commandment number 3. Pull yourself back and your personal feelings. I don't like the way the child, eats. What? So who cares? You have to be objective. Your personal likes and dislikes are absolutely irrelevant in your attitude toward them. Okay, Rabbi, so if you think this was critical, get a load of this one. So you take your kid to a shul, and they start acting up. What's our first reaction? Our first reaction, most people are, what are people going to think of me? People are going to think I'm not a good parent. People are going to think my children don't listen to me. Meaning the first reaction is, what are people going to say about me? Which is dead wrong. Who cares? Why are you so worried about what people are going to say about you? It doesn't matter what people are going to say about you. It all matters that one thing. What's good for this kid? Does the kid belong in shul? If the kid doesn't belong to shul, then you made a big mistake bringing them to shul. And if the kid belongs in shul, then you take the kid out and explain to them how they need to behave. Why is the first thing that runs through our head, what are people going to say about me? You know why? Because we have an erroneous view of our children. We feel, you know what my child is? Well, I have to dress in a certain way because my clothing reflect upon me. If my clothing are soiled or dirty, then it reflects badly on me. So my child has to behave. My child has to be A, B, and C. They have to be a certain way because of the way it reflects about me. Why? Because they're mine. They're my objects. I have a shirt, I have clothing, I have a car, I have a house, and I have my children. They all talk about me. No. Here's the mistake. The mistake is your children are not yours. They're not your object. They're not your acquisition. They're not your property. They're not your kinyan. They're your responsibility. God gave you a gift and you have an achrayus to do what's best for them. And the way people think about you and what people are going to say about you should not enter your mind. The only thing one should think is, what is good for this little Yingala, this little Meidala. Says Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch, and this also, you have to be a Gadol Yisrael to even begin to say. You have two brothers, Cain and Hevel. Hevel turned out to be this really nice guy. He's tending the sheep. And Cain, he's the first serial killer. What did the parents do wrong? What did Chavala do wrong with her entire son Cain? What mistake did she make? But she sent him to the wrong camp. What did Chava do wrong? Says Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch, Chava made a mistake. You know what the mistake is? Naming him Cain. When she said Cain, Kanisi ish es Hashem, I acquired a child with Hashem. He's my kid. People are going to say, oh, look how cute he is. The mother did a good job. Chava had a certain feeling of ownership of her child. And when a child thinks that his parent considers them his property, their ownership, they start to feel entitled to the extent where, guess what Cain did to Hevel because of that? Cain murdered Hevel because of the erroneous attitude that his mother had. Where do we learn that from? Where do Chazal say that? The Torah says that, says Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch. It's in the name. Kanisi ish es Hashem. He's my child. I acquired him. He's my ownership in this world. Okay, so that's commandment number 4. Your child is not your property. Your child is your responsibility. Okay, number 5. This is very important. So you come home on a regular day. Your child says, Daddy, Tati, Abba, Mommy, could I do X, Y, and Z? On a regular day, you'd have no reason not. Can I go outside and play? Okay, it's 8 o'clock at night, it's 7:30 at night. It's not the nishkeferlich. You would let them do it. But one day you come home, and you're in a rotten mood. You're tired, you're grouchy, you're groggy. You have, it's the winter time. You better, Tati, can I do? No! So, be very careful before you say no. You know why? Because when you say that no, they're going to know the only reason you said no is because you're in a bad mood. And there's really no reason to say no because other times you've let them do it. So you know what they learn from there? They learn from there that your no is not really a no. It's whimsical. So then a week later, Dad, can I smoke? No. So the kid says, no. No doesn't mean anything. No is whimsical. No is not a no. No is, my father was in a bad mood. Make sure, be very, very careful before you say no. Whenever you could say yes, you should always say yes. Always say yes, unless you have a really good reason. You know why? Because there are going to be things that you have to say no, and they need to know that a no is a no. Don't just say no arbitrarily. Otherwise, they're going to think that your no is dependent on your mood, your feelings. They have to understand when you say no, you mean no. Another example. It's 8:30 at night. They come down. Can I have a candy? Can I have a candy? Please, come on, that's not right. You're so mean. Well, what kind of parent are you? And now they're starting to push your buttons. And they're nagging, and they're annoying, and they're kvetching. And the easy thing is, okay, fine, just do it and get up to bed. Because just, how much could you bear it already? You're so mean. My friend's parents do it. You're the worst parent in the class. You're the worst parent in the whole world. May Adam Arishain V'Adata. There was never such a bad parent as you. And even if Hashem would destroy the world and recreate it with millions of parents, you'd be the worst parent ever. And even Bobby and Zadie know how bad. And you just say, get lost already, right? So what do you want to say? You want to say yes? Don't say yes. Because the moment you say yes, they know your no is not a no. So if you decided that a no is a no, then a no is a no, and no matter how annoying and nagging they are, they can't change your mind. Your no has to be a no, and your yes has to be a yes. Because when they see, they can manipulate it, and it's dependent on your feelings and your mood and the way you happen to feel at the time. Then when you really are going to need to say no to something important, then they'll say, you know what? Tati said no, he means no. Because he often says yes. So be very circumspect before you say no, so that it actually means something.
Isn't there really a deep-seated reason for both of them to have their outlook of Yitzchak and
Rivka?
Because they were totally colored by their upbringing, by Abraham in his case, and being...
Yeah, very good.
Yitzchak couldn't see past
Yeah, it's good. Thank you for bringing it up. Actually, I forgot to mention it. Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch happens to, I'll say, conjecture that there is a reasonable explanation for why Yitzchak loved Esav and Rivka loved Yaakov. I mean, I don't think we have evidence for this. He says it could be just a function of, opposites attracting, where Yitzchak, from the time of the Akedah, when his father was about to slit his throat, and he sees his whole world passing in front of him, and he saw the temporary nature of life, he withdrew. And he removed himself from the outside world. And from there on, he sat in his Daled Amos with the midah of Gvura, the midah of discipline, and maybe he even withheld himself from unleashing some of his abilities, and now he sees a son with charisma, with talent, with energy, and he sort of feels, I could vicariously live my talent through Yitzchak, through Esav. And on the other hand, Rivka, like Rabbi Esther mentioned, on the other hand, Rivka grew up among two crooks, Lavan and Besuel, and she's dreaming her whole life of when she'll have a little shefela like Yaakov, a tzaddik, a tam, and he's everything she always wanted. But be it as it may, even though there is a rational... Look, human nature is, you could have two parents and they could be on the same page. It's only human nature. One parent's going to like one kid and another parent's going to like another kid. That's human nature. But the kids cannot know that. The children should not feel that the parents have a favorite. Okay. Marv Rabbi Sai?
Does it mean in this passage, it doesn't mean that Yitzchak loved Esav over, he loved him because Kitzayid B'Piv, it was a quality of Esav that he liked. I'm sure that there's a quality
that Rivka liked.
So
right.
Not that they liked, that there was a preference.
But still, the point Rav Shamshon Hirsch is bringing out is the children should not feel that the parent loves one of them because of this quality or that quality. The children should feel that all children are loved equally. Now, it doesn't mean the parents don't appreciate their individual qualities, but there shouldn't be a feeling that there's a favorite.
They should appreciate each one for their qualities. Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi said this next one is revolutionary. And this is really... Hey is from the collected writings of Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. That the yes and the no is no. That's Collected Writings of Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Which volume is it? It's volume 8, I believe. Okay, this next one is really out of the box. This one is out of this world. And you're going to say, what? This is really out there. And if it didn't come from the source that it does, say, how could you say such a thing? This is Mamish Oyam Menorah. Look at number 13, the sixth ingredient, the sixth commandment. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham Aviv. Yitzchak said to Avraham his father, Vayomer Avi. He said, my father. Vayomer Hineni b'ni. And Avraham said to Yitzchak, Hineni b'ni, here I am. So you get a load of this? Yitzchak turns to his father, Tata, where are you? And Avraham says, Vayomer Hineni b'ni, behold, here I am. Okay, what word does Avraham use in response to Yitzchak? Hineni. Does anybody know where else does Hineni appear? By the Akedah. When Hashem presented Avraham with the test of the Akedah. Vayacher hadavar ma'elev olekim nisas Avraham. Vayomer elav Avraham. Vayomer Hineni. Says Rashi, what does Hineni mean? It's a Rashi. Kach hi aniyasam shel chasidim. This is the response of the pious. Lashon anavahu. It's a lashon of humility. V'lashon zimon. Here I am. I'm ready to do your bidding. When Hashem called Avraham, Avraham used the lashon of humility. Behold, here I am. It's a response of humbleness. It's a response of, I'm ready to do your bidding. Marav Rabbi, if that's what Avraham used in response to God, why in the world would Avraham have said that to Yitzchak, his son? Yitzchak says, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham Avi, Vayomer Avi. And Avraham said, Hineni b'ni. What are you talking about? Hineni is when you speak to God. Hineni is the humility you show in front of the Ribono Shel Olam. It's a lashon of, I'm here, I'm ready to do your bidding. I'm avato myself to you. I humble myself before you. Is this how Avraham speaks to Yitzchak? Says the Mekubal Hagoyin, Rav Gamliel Rabinovich. And if he didn't say it, I don't know how we could say such a thing. From here, we learn that the proper way to speak to a child is Lashon Anava and Lashon Zimun. You speak with humility, you speak, here I am, I'm ready to do for you whatever you need. Not only is there a mitzvah that a child has to honor his parent, there's a mitzvah in the Torah, the parent has to honor the child. Lo rak haben tzarich lechabed es aviv, gam ha'av tzarich ledaber levnoi b'derech kavod. Says Reb Gamliel, do you know how Avraham was successful in raising a tzaddik like a Yitzchak? Because he spoke to him the same way he spoke to the Ribono Shel Olam. Be'anivos, be'kavod. Says Reb Gamliel, I could tell you from experience. I speak to hundreds and thousands of Bachrim who went off the derech. And the main reason that children go off today, because the parents speak down to the children. What's wrong with you? What's the matter with you? You're good for nothing, stupid, shoiter shaba'olam, goylam. The reason why children go off is because their parents are overbearing. They don't speak to him b'derech kavod. Says Rav Gamliel, you have to understand that what we expect from children today is not a nisayon any less than the Akedah. I mean, what do we ask a kid to do? We ask a young bacher, what do we ask him to do? Don't pay attention to the billboards. Don't pay attention to the media. Don't pay attention to the attractions of the television and the internet. No, sit in your Dalet Amos, learn Torah, daven to Hashem. And he has all the glitz and the glamour staring him in the face. And what does the poor kid know already? What you're asking the kid to give up, you're asking him to overcome a challenge greater than the Akedah. So if you're asking him to overcome a challenge greater than the Akedah, what kind of language do you need to speak to him? If you want to tell the kid you have to do an Akedah, then the same way Avraham tells Yitzchak, Sheifela, this is not going to be easy, Hineni b'ni, I'm here for you, Lashon Anava, Lashon Zimun, then you can't speak to your kids any less. Says Rav Gamliel, that which they said in the earlier generations, that the only way to give over emunah is by beating your kids with a stick, they were not talking about our generation. Says Rav Gamliel, let me tell you what my mother said. My mother said that if the Torah was written today, it would not say Kabed es avicha v'yasimecha. It would say Kabed es bincha v'yasbitecha. The Torah was written 3,300 years ago. If it was written today, they would have changed it. How can anybody say such a thing?
Yeah.
That's what he says.
Like Elisa says this?
As he said, his mother would say.
Right.
We see it's true. That kids today are different than they once were. And therefore, you want to be successful with your children, we have to completely alter the way we talk to them. Hineni b'ni. We speak to them b'lashon anava, humility. I'm ready to do whatever you need. Now, it doesn't mean kids don't have to learn respect, but it's a two-way street. It's a mutual thing. You want to have a kid like a Yitzchak, you got to build them up like Avraham did. Hineni b'ni. Hineni b'ni. Whoa, how could you say such a thing? Rashi says it. Rashi says Hineni is Lashon Hanivos and Lashon Zimun. Okay, Mar Rabbi Sai, the next commandment.
Might say his mother is wrong because the reason that we see it over here, why is Avraham so successful?
Yeah.
Because he said it to Hashem, he said it to him. So even then, everybody was Machari.
You mean it should have said it back?
Yeah.
I don't think she really meant that we would be Magia.
You have to be careful what you say. Also,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's still dangerous to say something like that.
Yeah. You have to understand. He said, I'm assuming she said it tongue in cheek. It's not something that we could ever say. Yeah. Number 7. Marv Rabbi said, this is a good one. V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav. God was standing on the ladder. Vayoymar, Ani Hashem Elokei Avraham Avicha. I am God, the God of your father Avraham, and the God of Yitzchak. Wait a second. Avraham, who is not your father, is called Avicha. Yitzchak, who is your father, is not called Avicha. What's going on over here? Why, when it comes to Avraham, is it Elokei Avraham Avicha? And when it comes to Yitzchak, it's Elokei Yitzchak. Says the Chidah, the name of the Rishonim, that one of the most important responsibilities of a father and a mother is to speak to the child in a warm, loving way. The kid's name is David. You don't call him David. Shefala, Yingala, Davidal, my dear, my son, my zin, my zinashi, whatever you want to call. There's a Zizkeit. The kid is mamish a chaleria. No, you're a Zizkeit, a sweetheart. Yeah, the kid is like, you want to climb the walls. Yeah, you want to bang your head again? No, Zisa Yingala. Avraham Avinu, says the Chidah, learned with Yaakov, spent time with him, always called him Beni, 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 Beni. But Yitzchak didn't call Yaakov Beni. Yitzchak called Esav Beni. If you don't call your son Beni, then we're not going to call you Aviv. Because your responsibility as an Av is to always articulate the relationship of Beni. You know who Yitzchak called Beni? He constantly referred to Esav as Beni. This is part of the favoritism. Look at 19. Vayomer Avi. Vayomer Hineni. By the way, look how Yitzchak talks to Esav. Yitzchak talks to Esav. Hineni. Anivos. Zimun. Miata Beni. He thought he was Esav. Vayomer Yaakov Elav Vanochi Esmachar Shabbat Vayomer Mazem Yatam Soy Beni. Vayomer Zayag Yisham Shcha Beni. How does that Beni Esav? V'lo Yikir Vayomer Atazeh Beni. Vayomer Yisham Beni. Vayomer Shcha Beni. Every single sentence. He didn't just call him Shefala one time. Every time Yitzchak addressed Esav, Beni, 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 Beni. So Yitzchak is the Av of Esav, but Yitzchak's not the Av of Yaakov. Why? He abdicated his job. He didn't fulfill his job. We're not going to call him Aviv. Part of the responsibility of the father is Lashon Chiba. Who says this?
No.
Not Glatstein. Chida. In the name of Rabbeinu Ephraim on the Rishonim. Okay, next one. Now you're going to like this one. It's going to save you money. Okay? Tati, a new iPod came out. I want it. No. Tati, a new thing came out. I want it. No. Someone else in my class has this. Could I also have it? No. You can't have it. Why? Why do you need it? What do you mean? Well, you're working on Wall Street. Why do you need an iPad? Why do you need... Children don't need things. They don't need to have things. Now, again, you need some common sense over here, and there's not exeris hakasav. Children don't have to have items. They don't have to have things. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes, it says in Pirkei Avos, your house should be open wide, and the poor should be members of your household. So it's repetitive. Obviously, if your doors are open wide, there'll be a lot of aniyim in your house. No, these are two different things. The first thing is your door should be open wide so the aniyim could come in. V'yiyu aniyim b'nei beisecha. The people who live in your house should be aniyim. Meaning they don't have to have things. Oh, something new came out. Good. It's very nice it came out. You don't need it. Why? It's not a good idea for children to have a lot of things. And obviously they need toys, they need outlets, they need to keep out of trouble. So you need to use common sense over here. And I'm not here to tell you what yes and what no. I'm telling you generalities. The generality is children don't need things to be happy. Actually, from my personal experience, the more you give children, the more cranky they get. You get them saying they don't like it. He got something else, Everything is peaceful until you gave them something. That's generally what happens. Again, you're not going to get away without it. You're not going to have a birthday present. No, I went to a Shiur in Agra de Perka and they said that you don't give children anything. Okay, so don't take this too seriously. What?
Let's get Rabbi Glatstein.
Yeah, so don't blame this on me. I'm just telling you a general principle. Don't think that for a child to be happy and successful, they have to have things. Okay, that's number 8. Number 9. Number 9 is like this. Number 9 is that it's called joint responsibility. So there's a new kid in the house, and basically all the other kids are jealous. They're vying for daddy and mommy's attention. So here's a way to diffuse the whole situation. You give the kids responsibility. And it doesn't even have to be responsibility that they could carry out. Instead of the child feeling that they've been shafted and the attention of the parents is now being shifted to a younger sibling, so now you tell the little kid, she's 2.5 years old, Zizkait, you want to make the bottle? She's going to spill half of it all over the floor. It's okay, nothing will happen, you wipe it up. Give them responsibility that they should feel, instead of being rejected and they're being promoted. The child should feel they've gotten a promotion, not they've lost the attention of the parent or the grandparent. They are now partners with the parent. When a child feels that, again, this is all part of raising the child up. When a child feels that they're being elevated to be the helper of the parent, they have a different view of themselves. When you're dealing with a younger sibling, bring in the older sibling and say, you think, we want to ask your advice about this. What do you have to say about, could you help us out? Then the child feels that the parents are elevating them to be on their level. It's very interesting. The Chidah, this is from the first 10 commandments, says that when Lavan ran after Yaakov Avinu, it says Yaakov took Echav, his brothers, and they gathered stones. So first of all, Yaakov doesn't have brothers. He has one brother, and Esau was coming to kill him, so he didn't bring Esau. Who are the brothers that the pasuk says Yaakov took to gather the stones? So Rashi says, Echav, Banav, his children. Says the Chidah, you want to be successful with your children? Don't treat them as children. Treat them as your brothers. Treat them as your peers. He talks about Banav Gedolim, adult children, teenage children. If they feel that, you're giving them like an elevated status. That in your mind, they're like on your level. Again, you have to know how to play it. You have to be diplomatic about it. Obviously, the more they feel you're promoting them, the more respect they're going to give to you. Because after all, you're the one who's promoting them. So that's the concept of joint responsibility. It's diplomacy. You're not shafting your attention. You're giving them responsibility. All of a sudden, I remember I had a kid who was... one time he acted out. Yeah, only one time that I can remember. Just joking, right? So, and then my wife said, you know what? Instead of punishing him, do me a favor, set the table. And he became a different kid. He turned around. Because now, he's chashav. He's a helper. Doesn't always work, by the way. What?
That in itself, sometimes people feel that's a punishment.
Yeah.
Set the table.
Yeah.
Or try to get the kid involved by saying, please, die for the baby.
Poor baby.
Marva Rabbi say, ingredient number 10 is very possibly the most important ingredient of all. So you have this guy who kills b'shoigeg. So where does he go? He goes into the Arei Mikvat. Until when? Until the Kohen Gadol died. What in the world does this guy who killed B'Shogeg got to do with the Kohen Gadol? It's almost as if this guy is going to be praying, he's going to be davening, Shema Koileinu, Thomas is a Kohen Gadol, he's going to be davening that God should knock off the Kohen Gadol. Almost the Kohen Gadol's, his life is in jeopardy when people kill B'Shogeg. And the Gemara says yes. Basically, it's the Kohen Gadol's fault when he was Kohen Gadol, the guy, it was a slip of the hand, he killed B'Shogeg. So apparently we see from the Gemara that the Kohen Gadol had a responsibility, that he should have davened, that under his auspices, nobody makes an error, nobody makes a mistake. So comes Rav Shlomo Wolbe in the Sefer Zriya Ubinyan Bechinuch, and he says, where in the Torah does it say that a Kohen Gadol is obligated to daven, that when he's the Kohen Gadol, nobody makes a mistake? I mean, you have a whole Parshas Emar. It says what begadim he has to wear. It says that he better wear the begadim when he does the avodah. Nowhere does it say in Kala Torah Kula, not in Tanakh, not in Shas Bavli Yishalmi, that a Kohen Gadol has an achrayas to daven, that nobody accidentally flips up an axe and kills somebody. Elamai, what we see from here is that it doesn't need to be said. That implicitly, that if someone is in a position of responsibility, if you're a Kohen Gadol, if you're a Rosh Hashiva, if you're a Rebbe, if you're a parent, from here we learn that you have an absolute responsibility to pray for the people under your auspices. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Where does it say it? It doesn't need to say it. Lama likra svarahu. It's a logic. If you're responsible for them, then you need to daven for them. And there is no one more responsible for their children and grandchildren than the parent and the grandparent. And by the way, the obligation never ends. You're never too old for it. I'll just share with you a story I said last night, but it's worthwhile to repeat. They came to the Stipler. They said, Stipler, give us advice for raising children. Stipler said, there's no advice. Tears, daven, daven, daven. Stipler says, you see my little Chayimol over here? The Stipler says, every day I daven that Chayimol should be a Yarei Shamayim. You know how old Reb Chayimol was? He was 52 years old. He was already one of the Gedolei Hadar. And the Stipler says, I still daven that Chayimol should be a Yarei Shamayim. That means this is not a job that we could ever forego. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down that there are specific intervals of the davening to focus on this. Ava Rabba. First of all, Birchas HaTorah. When you say V'niya anachnu v'tze'atzo'enu v'tze'atzo'ei amcha beis Yisrael. And that's the first interval. Number 2, in Ava Rabba or Ava Soilam, when you say V'sein b'libeinu bino lahavinu l'haskil, one should daven for the success of their children. And Uvalotzion, when you say the words L'man lo niga larik v'lo neled lebahala. And we all hope, whether we have children, we're waiting for children, we daven for the children of Klal Yisrael. This is a tremendous responsibility on our generation to daven for the future generations, and ultimately this is a very important ingredient in raising children. It's all siyata d'shmaya. Let's just recap very quickly the 10 ingredients. Number 1, whatever it takes. It could be innovative, it could be creative, it could be novel, whatever works. Number 2, you have to recognize the specific tendencies of the child and guide them accordingly. Number 3, no favoritism. Number 4, your child is not your property, it's your responsibility. Number 5, a no is a no, and a yes is a yes. If you say no, you better mean it. Number 6, to speak to children b'derech anava and zimun. Number 7, derech chiba, shefela, mamala, zizkai. Number 8, they don't need everything. Number 9, joint responsibility. And number 10, tefillah. We hope the Rebbe Shalom answers all of our tefillahs and that everybody sees the nachas that they're hoping for. Have a great day. Shkoyach.
Wow. You're getting better and better.
That's very kind of you.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.